Hey guys, coming back for Agent Carter Season 2, Episode 4, Smoke and Mirrors, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. As you guys know, I've really been enjoying the season, especially after the twist in last week's episode. I was really looking forward to this one, and by far, this was the best episode of the season. I love this episode, especially the flashbacks. I think this episode not only made us care about Peggy's character more, because we already really cared about her. It showed what she went through, but also what Agnes Cully went through. Like, you really understood Agnes Cully's transition from Agnes to Whitney, and I think they did that very well here. But let's just get into this episode because I loved it, and just a great episode. So we start off in the past. We see a young Peggy is playing as a knight, saving the damsel from the dragon, and her brother Michael snatches her sword away, holds it above her head until Peggy knocks him down. Their mother comes over, breaks up their fighting, and tells Peggy that one day she'll have to behave like a lady, and that is very imperative for the rest of this episode, and for the show in general. I mean, Peggy is not your typical lady. She really isn't. I mean, she's a badass. She's willing to take down whoever gets in her way, and I love seeing that, and especially what her brother did. Her brother clearly just didn't really just saw it as a ridiculous thing. I mean, especially back then, it really wasn't ladylike for a woman to be out fighting crime like Peggy is, and I think this episode showed that very, very well. So back in the present, at the Stark estate, Peggy is eating as Wilkes works as best as he can, despite the fact that he's insubstantial. I love the part where she was eating a sandwich and some of it got on him and he really couldn't do anything. Funny stuff there. He explains he doesn't have any sense of his body, but says that it's worth if he's with her. They move closer, but they pull apart, and Wilkes explains that they're looking at the plans for a fast neutron reactor, and I like seeing Wilkes here. I know some people are upset that Wilkes is alive, but I feel like it makes sense for this to happen. I feel like at some point Wilkes is not going to have to be sprayed constantly. And 3 years before that, Agnes Cully, Whitney Frost, basically patented a reactor 1,000 times more powerful, and Wilkes warns that Agnes defies categorization, and a maid, Maybelle, brings Agnes a package, and Maybelle sets it down and says that something is moving in there, and Agnes dismisses her, and basically she then opens the box to reveal a cat of white rats, and basically, obviously, we don't know what that's about. So Jarvis then joins Peggy in their car outside of Chadwick's campaign headquarters and says that Chadwick is inside, but there's no sign of Agnes, and Peggy's reading a movie magazine that notes that Agnes has disappeared, and figures that exposing her is the key to exposing everything, because obviously, if they know what's going on with her, then basically they'll find out everything else, and just everything else will just come together. They'll find out the killer of Jane Scott, which, again, seems to have gone away. I hope they get back to that, because it seems to have gone away. And of course, what's going on with Zero Matter, just everything with that. So Chadwick comes out and gets in his car. Peggy notices that the driver, Rufus, has the same wound that Peggy inflicted on the assassin that came for her. So she's very clear, she very much thinks that the assassin that's after her could very well be Rufus, because as we know, there is an assassin after her, and we don't know who that is right now. So Jarvis drives off after Chadwick's car, and in the suburbs, Peggy calls Grace and tells Jarvis that the car is registered to Rufus Hunt, who was discharged during the war for black market profiting. He is currently head of security at the Arena Club, and Peggy suggested they subdue Rufus. So Jarvis gets an idea, pulls into an alleyway, takes a tranquilizer rifle out of the trunk, and basically they're thinking of interrogating him. So then we go to Brockton, Oklahoma in 1920, and we get a really good backstory of Agnes Cully, which I really loved. We see a young Agnes is fixing a radio. Her mother, Wilma, comes in, complains about the mess, warns that Uncle Bud Schultz is coming by any minute. She's surprised that Whitney has fixed the radio and tells her daughter to clean up and be sweet to Bud, and as she goes, Wilma says that Bud takes care of them. Bud comes in, kisses Wilma, then asks Whitney what she's doing. He takes away her pencil, tells her to smile, and basically Agnes says as she's thinking, and once Bud goes into the next room, Wilma angrily tells Agnes to be sweet because Agnes is ruining this for her, and the girl, basically, she straight out says she does not like Bud. She doesn't think that Bud's a good guy, and Wilma tells her to stay out of her hair for a couple of hours before going to the bedroom. Agnes turns up the radio so she won't hear Bud and Wilma together, and you can kind of tell why Agnes transformed into Whitney Frost, because it's clear that she didn't really get any respect back then, and no one really cared as much about her. Now they do, obviously, because she's this huge star. And I don't think they necessarily were trying to get us to sympathize with Whitney, more than they were trying to get us to understand why Agnes Cully returned to Whitney Frost and why she's doing what she's doing. So Agnes turns off her radio, checks the black spot on her forehead. She then picks up one of the rats, concentrates, and nothing happens. Chadwick knocks at the door, and Agnes puts the rat back in the cage. Her husband comes in, and Agnes says that she's running her lines. And Chadwick says that her director Kenneth is still missing, and worries that it'd be terrible for for his campaign. Now, as we know, Kenneth is dead. Agnes killed him. So if Kenneth turned up murdered, he asks Agnes to wear a dress for that nice photo session and assures her that she'll be the most beautiful first lady. And once he leaves, Agnes locks the door, takes out a rat. She concentrates, and this time the dark matter consumes it and re-enters her hands. And looking in the mirror, Agnes realizes that the black spot has grown. So she takes out some makeup, starts to cover it over, and obviously it's not really working. And again, I like that Agnes doesn't really know what she's doing and what this zero matter really is capable of. It makes this a lot more interesting, because I think that Agnes, kind of has a plan, but she doesn't really know what this zero matter is really doing to her. And I think that she wants to just cover it up and continue her act, when clearly she can't really do that, because this zero matter is going to be the thing that exposes who she really is. Definitely a thing that's going to happen. That's what the zero matter, I think, is really going to do, and I'm definitely interested in seeing what's going to happen there. So then we get what is by far one of the funniest Jarvis scenes we have ever gotten. I love this scene. Jarvis pounds on Rufus's door, claiming to be the police, and has the most over-the-top American accent you could ever think of. I mean, hilarious stuff. I mean, the guy who plays Jarvis is always great, but here, one of the funniest moments with Jarvis ever. So great. I loved it. I was just bursting out, and I was rolling on the floor. This was so great. So Rufus hastily dresses, goes out the rear, and awaiting Peggy, shoots him with a tranquilizer dart. He doesn't drop, and they fight. Rufus tries to strangle Peggy. She manages to grab another dart, jab it into his arm, and he goes down. Jarvis locks him in the truck. Rufus wakes up, jabs Jarvis with a dart before Peggy knocks the killer out, and Jarvis goes down. So Peggy drives back to Stark's manor and finds Sousa there. He says that Jack called and approved her vacation days, and Peggy tries to get rid of him. Sousa says that he has more information on Agnes, and Peggy takes the files and says that she'll read it. He figures that she's trying to brush him off, and notices a sleeping Jarvis in the car. Peggy claims that he's drunk, and Sousa hears Rufus pounding in the trunk. She finally admits that she has a man there, so they go inside, and Sousa complains that Peggy committed a felony, and that obviously this isn't a good thing, because, it's illegal to obviously hold someone hostage. So Peggy, basically, he's also unhappy that Peggy didn't bring him into this. That is a big thing, obviously. I mean, Sousa wants to be involved in this case, and Peggy did not consult him personally. She said, hey, I want you to help me out. She didn't do that, and obviously Sousa's really upset about that, and Peggy says that she had to give him plausible deniability, and Sousa insists on helping her, but Peggy says that she's going to kill Rufus. She does not want Sousa's help, and later, Sousa questions Rufus while Peggy looks on. Rufus refuses to say anything, describes how the Japanese tortured him but got nothing. Peggy prepares a syringe and tells Rufus that they're not going to torture him because they just don't have time. So back to Bletchley Park, England, 1940. At the code department, Mr. Edwards talks to Peggy privately in his office. He offers her congratulations on her wedding proposal and gives her an envelope. By the way, I love seeing this more like innocent Peggy. It's something that we're not used to seeing, because, Peggy's usually a badass and things like that. So seeing this more like ladylike side of Peggy, seeing her completely out of her element, was really interesting. And I think Haley Atwell really did it. I think this was Haley Atwell. I don't know if someone else played her, but if it was Haley Atwell, she really, I think, did a great job. And she always does a great job, but she slayed it in this episode. She really did. So who offers her congratulations on her wedding proposal and gives her an envelope from the Special Operations Executive. Churchill has created himself and needs field agents. They need women who won't draw attention and are recruiting Peggy, and Edward says it's a privilege. Peggy says that she's not meant to be in the field, because obviously her mother said it's not ladylike, and Edward says that it's her chance to strike a major blow for king or country, and after a moment, Peggy says that she'll discuss it with her fiancé, but doesn't think that she's cut out for that kind of work. And I like that we saw that Peggy really wasn't, was kind of apprehensive about doing this. Now that she's so used to it, just seeing her not knowing if this really was for her, I thought was very interesting, and I definitely like seeing that. So Peggy then jams a syringe into Rufus's neck, explains that she injected him with a virulent strain of malaria, and she warns that it'll be fatal in 20 minutes and will return in 10 minutes to give him the antidote if he talks. Peggy and Sousa leave, and Peggy explains that Stark's formula generates cold as Rufus yells for them to come back. Peggy makes tea, and Back to Brockton, Oklahoma, 1928. We see a teenage Agnes is working on her generator plans in the kitchen. Wilma's found out that Bud is cheating on her, tells her to get out by the next day, and obviously, Agnes was right. Bud's not a good guy, and we see that once he drives away, Wilma goes back inside, complains that Whitney could have been nicer to Bud, and Agnes says she doesn't like him, and Wilma tells her that the science program won't take a girl, and the girl says she'll get away from Wilma, and Wilma drags her to mirror, says that her face is the only thing that will get her anywhere in the world, and that's very interesting hearing her say that, especially now that Whitney's such a big, Agnes is such a big star and everything, and now she has that black spot on her, and knowing that she's involved with Zero Matter, it's probably because her mother told her that you're not going to be good in that field. And I really feel that what was going on with Peggy juxtaposed really well to what was going on with Agnes, because they both had to deal with women doing things that at the time were out of their element. And I think they did that very well here. Peggy in the sense of, being in the SSR and everything and doing that. And then Agnes wanting to be a scientist, which again was not something that women did back then. I definitely like seeing this. It was definitely very interesting. So back in the present, Chadwick calls Agnes and complains that she's late for the photo shoot. She claims that she's not feeling well, hangs up on her husband, and the black spot we realize has spread further on her forehead. So it's even worse right now, and she can't cover it up anymore. And Sousa tries to get Rufus to give up a name. He finally gives them the names of Thomas Gluckester and Hugh Jones, and he figures that his superiors will kill him and that they destroy what they can't buy. And also, I love the scene with Rufus where he's basically insulting Sousa, saying, "How'd you get that cast and everything in the leg?" And Sousa basically telling him that I've, had this PTSD and everything and what he's going through. Very, very powerful stuff, because we know, of course, that Sousa did fight in the war and that he's had, a bad leg because of it, and it was just a really great scene. I really love that. So he figures that his superiors will kill him, and they destroy what they can't buy. Peggy prepares to smash the antidote, and Rufus says the Council of Nine records their meetings, and the tapes are at a storage room in the club, and basically he gave them the information that they needed. So Wilkes has Jarvis write out his equations, but realizes that he's at a dead end, and in his cohesive state, he sees dark matter forming on the chalkboard, and Sousa and Peggy come in and explain that they're going to get a judge to give them a warrant for the Arena Club. The agents go to the SSR and brief a team on how they're going in. A team of FBI agents come in with Vernon, who tells them that the War Department is auditing the SSR, and Sousa has no choice but to agree. So once Masters and Peggy are alone, Masters says that it's safer to be seen as a team player, and I like seeing the scene between Peggy and Masters, because it really didn't seem like, I didn't really know what Masters' agenda was. Like I said, we know that Masters has been trying to get Jack to do something different, but Peggy insists the Council of Nine is involved with an assassination and market manipulation, and Masters demands to see her source personally, and Peggy refused to give up Rufus's independence. He points out that she's a non-American spy, and says that she's going to have to work hard to stay out of coming trouble. Peggy says that she'll manage, and Masters warns her that her friends may not be so lucky. So we see back in Hampstead, England in 1940, Peggy meets with her fiance, not husband, fiance, Fred Wells, and her brother Michael at her engagement party. She mentions that they asked her to be a spy, and Fred assures Michael that they turned down the offer, and Michael's surprised that Peggy did so, because he thought that Peggy wanted to do that. And I think it's just, knowing that flashback in the beginning, it really worked out really well, because you could see that Michael always knew that Peggy wanted to be more than what a typical woman was. And once Fred goes to get a drink, Peggy asks Michael for his opinion on Fred, and he wonders why she turned down the SOE job, and admits that he recommended her, that he was the one that did it. He was the one that trusted Peggy. He thought that Peggy should do this, and Michael figures that she wants a life of adventure, but everyone has drawn her dreams out of her, and that's true. Peggy has always wanted to seek adventure, but she didn't really think she could do that, because everyone told her, no, that's not ladylike. And he says that Peggy still has time to change her mind, and insists that she is meant to fight, and angry, Peggy walks away. So, obviously, this is not something that Peggy wants to do, and knowing that Michael did that, he really did do a nice thing. He's trying to tell her, look, this is what you should be doing, but she really didn't want to, and I find that very interesting. So, back in the present, Sousa catches up to Peggy, admits that the judge is in the council's pocket. He warns the Arena Club has removed any incriminating evidence, and Peggy tells Sousa to stay there and protect himself. He got the same speech from Masters that the man gave Peggy, and assures her that he's in it with her, and basically Sousa has Jane's tissue sample from the autopsy. They go to the estate to talk to Rufus, and Sousa cuts him free, says that the council's onto them, so they have to eliminate him, and Rufus tells him to finish him off. Sousa pulls the trigger, the revolver jams, and Rufus punches him, runs, and once he's gone, Peggy emerges from hiding, and Rufus goes to Agnes's house, demands to see Chadwick. It's clear that Rufus is working with Agnes and Chadwick, and Peggy and Sousa listen in on the bug that they planted on Rufus, and Rufus pours himself a drink, refusing to tell Whitney anything, literally nothing, he doesn't tell her anything. So, back in Hampstead, England in 1940, we get, honestly, I think a really tragic scene. This was really sad. We see Mrs. Carter prepares Peggy for a wedding, and the SOE letter is on the dresser. A man pulls up, delivers a message that Michael has died in the war. Peggy takes off the wedding ring, picks up the SOE letter, and leaves. And now we know why Peggy is in the SSR and why she's so good at it. Mainly because of her brother. Her brother gave her that motivation. Her brother was the one that said, you know what, do something that's out of your element. Don't be a regular woman. Don't just get married, because this is not what Peggy wants. And I think Peggy's realizing in this moment that life's too short. She needs to take this opportunity, or else she's not going to, or else she's not going to feel satisfied with herself. And I think they really did a great job of giving us this origin story in the middle of a season rather than the beginning of the show. It was just really great the way they did it, because other shows would probably do this in the beginning of the season, and they didn't do that here. And it really, I think, makes Peggy a much more interesting character. Not that she wasn't already an interesting character, but knowing that Peggy, I think, did this because Michael told her to, and then Michael said, this is what you were meant to do, is very interesting, because yeah, it really was what Peggy was meant to do. This is her life now. This is what she does, and everything that every little action that she's done has all been because of her brother's death, and I love seeing that. Really powerful stuff, and I think they really made Peggy even more interesting than she already was. So, back in the present, Peggy notices Wilkes staring at the chalkboard. He said, and I love this scene with Wilkes, because he says it feels like something is pulling him away and that it would be easy to let go. And Peggy says that Michael told her that she was meant to fight, and she believes that Wilkes is the same, that he's meant to fight. And she tells him to hold on and reaches out to him, and Sousa notices, and I don't know if Sousa's getting jealous or whatever, but you have to remember, Sousa, you are engaged. You are engaged, and Violet is a very good woman. Violet's a good woman. You shouldn't treat her like shit, because she's a very good woman. So, and also, again, no Anna in this episode. I don't know where Anna went, but she was in episodes 1 and 2, and now she just disappeared. And I don't know if we're going to see Anna again. I hope we see Anna again. I hope we see Violet. I like these dynamics that they have with Peggy. They've been gone for the past few episodes, and I hope we see them again. And I get that we didn't really have time for them this episode, and obviously they're around. I want to see them before the season's over, and I think we will, just we're not seeing them right now. So Chadwick returns home. Rufus tells him what happened. He claims that he didn't tell Peggy anything, but Agnes doesn't believe him. She thinks that he did give out information, and Rufus admits that he gave up the names of 2 of the council, but warns that Chadwick will protect him, or he'll tell the council what Chadwick is up to. And Agnes closes the drapes, tells Chadwick that she has something to show him. She chokes Rufus, the dark matter consumes her, the bug goes dead, and I think this is Agnes realizing, I can't keep up this charade anymore, I need to tell the truth. And the bug goes dead. Peggy and others have no idea what's going on, and obviously they don't really know how powerful this dark matter really is. So back in Hollywood, California in 1934, we see Agnes arrives in town, goes to the theater, the ticket lady recognizes her, wonders why she's back, and Agnes says that she comes to escape for her trouble, and Agnes doesn't have enough money for a ticket. The ticket lady gives her a free ticket, and as she goes in, and it kind of seems like this was where Agnes was happy, and it honestly does make sense. I just talked about the Great Depression in history class, and one of the things we talked about is that the one place to go to, like, get away from all your troubles was the movie theater. And I don't know if Agnes went through the depression, but with all the depression going on in her life, literally depression, her mother not wanting anything to do with her, dating this man that wasn't good for her, and things like that, it would make sense why Agnes would go to the theater, because that was where she could get away from all her troubles and enjoy herself. And it seemed like the only real relationship she had was the one with the ticket lady. And as she goes in, we meet this agent named Ned Silver. He sees Agnes, assures her that he could get her work as a model and actress, and basically tells her that her name can't be Agnes, it needs to be something like Whitney. And Agnes says that it sounds interesting, and that is why Agnes changed her name to Whitney Frost. And I loved seeing that. They did a very good job with that, and again, just like Peggy, made her a lot more interesting. I definitely love seeing that. And then the ending of this episode was So badass. I love the way this ended. Agnes stares at her hands. The blackness spreads further across her head. She tells Chadwick that was her fixing another of his problems. Her husband wonders what she is, and Agnes says that she's whatever she wants and smiles, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, incredible episode. I really love this episode because one of the things it really showed, I think, with Peggy and Agnes is how similar these two really are. They both did things that they didn't really think they could do, and they did, and they wanted to be different things, and I really feel that Agnes wanted to be a scientist. She never got to achieve that dream, and maybe now she's doing the Zero Matter because she wants to be a scientist, and it really seems like that's what she wanted to do, and I find that to be very interesting, definitely, is getting to know Agnes's character more. I definitely am looking forward to that. But let's talk about Chadwick, because it's clear that Agnes wants to come clean to Chadwick. She wants Chadwick to know what's going on. She doesn't want to hide it anymore, and she wants to tell him the truth. You can definitely tell that she wants to tell him what's going on. I don't know if she's necessarily going to do that. If, it takes a lot of guts, obviously, to do that, but I really think that Agnes, if she really cares about Chadwick, she needs to tell him what's going on, because Chadwick, sooner or later, he's gonna find out, and it's better if he finds out from her and not from another source. Definitely, I think she's gonna tell Chadwick. We'll have to see what happens there. But Chadwick obviously doesn't fully understand what's going on, and I really do feel that at some point Agnes is gonna leave Chadwick. I don't really think she needs him. I really don't think she does. I mean, I think this episode showed that Agnes can get by on her own. She really doesn't need Chadwick, who clearly, like I said, I don't think really loves her. I think he just wants her for her campaign. That's clearly what he wants. Rufus. Is Rufus the assassin went after Peggy? I mean, obviously, Chadwick and Agnes hired someone, and we don't know if Rufus is that assassin or not, and definitely that's very interesting. I'm going to say right now, I think Rufus is the killer of Jane Scott. I really do. I think he's the one that killed her, or it's Agnes. I don't think that Chadwick is capable of doing that. I think it was either Agnes or Rufus, and we'll have to see what's going on, because definitely it's one of them that's going on. Wilkes. Is Wilkes going to get out of this state that he's in? I mean, obviously, Sousa is starting to notice what's going on with him, so maybe Sousa is going to try to do something. I'm not really sure, but Sousa seems to be a bit jealous, and I'm just thinking, again, you are engaged to Violet, a very good woman who really cares about you. You have no reason to be upset right now, so I really hope they don't make it where this is like a love triangle, because that's exactly what I don't want the show to do. Something that Agent Carter's done so well is be so different from the other superhero shows. Other superhero shows, they've had love triangles here and there, and this show hasn't done that, and I hope they don't, because it's not something that they need. They don't need a love triangle. It's just, please don't do that. I'd be really upset if they did. It wouldn't be terrible, but, like, I just don't really want them to do that. So, I know some people are upset that Jarvis doesn't really have a clear thing to do this season, but no, he does. He's there to help out Peggy. That's what he's there. He's always been Peggy's concierge, and that's what he still is. He's her concierge. He's there if she needs any help, and that's why he's there. He's there for Peggy, and I definitely really love seeing that. But overall, guys, amazing episode. By far the best episode of the season. I absolutely love this episode. I love what we learned about Peggy and why she does what she does and why Agnes does what she does. And honestly, I could really see Agnes abandoning this life because, as we know, there's that black spot on her face, and she doesn't want to be the way she is anymore. She wants to change herself, and she wants to be something else, and I really feel that now she is no longer going to live this lie. She's going to be Agnes Coley. I think she's going to become a scientist, because I think that's really what she wants. She wants to be a scientist, and I think that's really the direction we're going to go in with her, and I really think they made her a much more interesting villain. This very much reminds me of Daredevil and Wilson Fisk, where you really understand Wilson Fisk, and you understand what he's trying to do. You kind of sympathize with her. I really do sympathize with Agnes. I understand what she's going through. I really do care about her because of this, and I'm really interested in seeing where they're going to go with her, because they really set up a very interesting conflicts here. But well, guys, let me know what you guys saw this episode. Where the hell is Jack, by the way? He kind of just disappeared. I don't know if he's coming back. We'll have to see. But that is my review. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next review, which will be for the series premiere of American Crime Story, which, guys, I am so ready to review that show to you. I mean, out of anything that I've been reviewing, that is the thing I've been most looking forward to review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.